Adam Lerner, BrooklynPhotoworks.com, and today I'm going to give you a more in-depth review of the Sony A7R Mark III, or the A7R III. I have got to spend just about 2 weeks with this camera. I actually have to return it very soon, and I can say it's kind of an awesome camera. I mean, to have the full frame capability in such a small and lightweight body is really pretty awesome. I don't know if I would pair it with this lens, let's say the 24-70 f2.8G. It's an amazing lens, actually, GM lens. It's really terrific. It's incredibly sharp, but you guys can see proportionately, it's just kind of like a huge honking lens on a tiny little body. One thing I did mention before is that I would totally add a grip to this, some kind of a grip, whether it be a tripod grip or an actual grip. I would add that. Now, when I first had this and was doing my first impressions, I said something about the battery life being kind of meh. I take that back, okay? So all you haters out there, the battery is actually pretty darn good. I'm pretty impressed with it, and it must have been a low charge or something. It showed that it had more, whatever the case may be, the battery is pretty damn good. So I'm gonna go through with you guys some of what I feel are like pros and cons. This is really just from my experience. This is not a scientific thing. It's just me using this camera. Again, what I really like about it, that it's a small form factor, that it's mirrorless, so that there's less mechanical parts, less moving parts. The focus is actually pretty darn good. Now, I didn't do a lot of continuous focus. I did a little bit, you know, capturing my dog, and she's very fast, and it was good. The camera itself is very fast and responsive. You know, it feels really peppy. It definitely kind of seems like it's on par with, you know, pro kind of gear. That electronic viewfinder is just awesome. I mean, you look through it, it's huge, it's bright, and you get an actual preview of what your photo is going to look like. And that is something that is seriously lacking on the Nikon and Canon equivalents, and that's something that I would love to have on my Canon, but there's reasons that I'll get to in a moment why I keep the Canon and I don't switch to Sony. All right, let's see. Oh, another great quality, using full frame lenses. Okay, even though we've got the same sensor as the A7 Mark II, the way that Sony kind of redesigned this is to get a little bit more out of that sensor. They didn't make the sensor any bigger, and you know, come on guys, like it's a 42 or 43 megapixel sensor. You're talking about 86 megabyte raw files, and these are not lossless raw files. So that means that every image, if you take 1,000 images, that's 86 megabytes times 1,000, which is a lot of gigajiggles, or whatever those things are that fill up your hard drives. And you know, look, for a photographer, a professional photography standpoint of view, if you're a working photographer, that is a lot of data to clog up your hard drives. Now, is it a disincentive? Is it a reason not to shoot Sony? I don't think so, but it's something that I'm not hugely a fan of. What you do get with this massive sensor is you get tremendous detail, paired with really terrific full-frame lenses, and that sensor, you're going to get extraordinary detail, and you're going to get extraordinary dynamic range coming from such a little camera. What else do we got? Okay, I like that it's got manual dials on here. I think that that's cool. I'm staying with the positives. I'm not going to the things that I'm not loving about it. Wi-Fi, very cool. I was able to get it to work. It was a little bit quirky. All right, I'm not going to lie. Wi-Fi was a real pain in the ass to use to try to transfer files, but I was able to do it, and I did it, and it can be done. Let's see. Tethering. This camera allows for you to tether to Capture One. So Nikon, Canon, and Sony, now Sony is part of that. You can tether to Capture One. So, I mean, Sony has really made a mark, you know, like all the third-party companies that are doing flash accessories, like ProPhoto, even has a Sony version. So they've really stepped up their game. And just the camera itself, another positive is that it's got 1/250th as your max shutter speed, which means that you are able to close down a fairly good amount of ambient light. So that's a pretty nice thing. You know, some of these mirrorless cameras, you know, they cap out at 1/180th or 1/200th. So having that extra little bit definitely helps to just, cut out a little bit of that ambient light. Again, guys, I mentioned the battery is actually pretty good. So I take that back. It's lightweight. I mean, the body on this thing I think weighs 1.5 pounds, which is nothing compared to the comparable Canon. And what else do I have on my little list here? Okay. All right, so there you go. Those are what I would consider the pros. Okay, let's talk about some of the cons. Okay, and again, just my opinion and my user experience. Body's very small, feels a little bit unbalanced. I just find that kind of navigating onto these buttons, like for example, this button that I have assigned to do shutter speed is kind of up and recessed, and I find that if I just kind of go to move it quickly, I have hit this EV compensation button, which is a pain in the ass. I don't really like the way that this thing feels. It feels plasticky. And I also find that this knob up here, this dial that I have assigned to changing aperture, I also feel that it's kind of wimpy and not terrific. Menu system is completely aggravating. I really do not like it. I find that I've got to go, digging all over the place just to try to get this thing going. Now, granted, once things are set up, it's not that big a deal. Once you assign your buttons, it's not that big a deal. Speaking of which, I think that there's too many buttons, too many things laid out, but maybe that's partly because we're dealing with such a small body that we've got to have more buttons on here. And honestly, I'd rather have buttons than menus to go digging around into. But I've got all of these function buttons assigned to different things, whether it be ISO or changing autofocus or things of that. So I find that to be kind of a little bit aggravating. The Play Memories app, I find it to be completely atrocious, but it does work, so maybe it'll get better. So I'll be positive about that. The screen, this really is not much of a flip out screen. Now, I have found that there were times, like for example, like I took like a little holiday picture with my wife and dog, and I literally put it on a picnic table and I just flipped the screen up like this, and I was able to frame the photo and get everything that I needed. So that was helpful. I would like to see, the screen being able to flip out, be a little bit more useful. And I honestly, I don't know, the resolution did not really impress me on it. I didn't really use the touch aspect of it, whatever. We talked about the files being too large, and what else did we talk about? The white balance was a little erratic. I was shooting outside and I was getting mixed results where it kept kind of shifting considerably, where some of the images were too warm, some of them were too cool. Obviously not a big deal if you're shooting raw, but just a little bit annoying. If this was just like a travel camera, and I was just literally just taking it around and I had some nice prime lenses, I think that this would be wonderful. I don't love the look of the files out of the Sony. I'm sorry, Sony people. Again, I'm not trying to come down on anybody. It's just my personal feeling. And to be honest with you, the skin tones out of this thing are insane. The focus on this thing is insane. Half of this camera, I wouldn't say half, but look, a good chunk of it is this freaking battery. So, as much as the Sony, I was able to shoot, a full day and still have plenty of battery life left. I know that with the 5D Mark II, the 1DX Mark II, that battery is not going to be kicked no matter how hard that I am pushing it. Support. Okay, so for example, if I need to send a camera to Canon, with the CPS program, I know that I can send a camera out like on a Monday, and I can have the camera back to me literally within a day or two. And if they can't repair it within the interval that I've subscribed to, they'll send me a loaner camera. I've heard some mixed things about Sony support. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it, but let me just kind of get to the point here. As a professional photographer, I'm a working photographer. I rely on this as a tool just like a carpenter would rely on his tools or her tools, hammers and saws, whatever the thing may be. This to me is a tool, okay? And with this, I need to get the absolute best and most reliable results in every given circumstance. So I know that in freezing cold weather, in hot weather, in wet weather, this thing is going to work. It's going to perform. The battery is going to last. I'm going to have amazing focus, and it's just going to do the job. Maybe if I were a landscape or travel photographer, the Sony would be wonderful because it's so small and it's so lightweight, and literally like two A7R III batteries take up less space than one 1DX Mark II, two A7R III bodies take up less space than one 1DX Mark II body. You can see the lenses are about the same. Actually, this one weighs more, but this one I think the dimensions are a little bigger, even though they both have the 82mm front element. So, you know, you can always get adapters and use Canon glass. So, should I switch? And obviously you guys have figured out that the answer to that for me is no. I'm not going to be switching to Sony anytime soon. The Canon works for me. I know that any photography studio I go to around the country and maybe internationally is going to have Canon gear. They're going to have Canon lenses, Canon bodies, Canon batteries, and support for Canon is a global international thing that I am very, very comfortable with. I also have a huge complement of really high-end Canon glass. So at this point in time, for me to sell this and to sell all that glass, I would lose too much money to get into the Sony system to make it worthwhile. As far as 4K video, this thing has 4K video. This thing apparently has more capabilities. So look, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to form factor and it's going to come down to personal preference. And for me, the Canon 1DX Mark II is the clear winner here, but this is a fantastic system. I definitely recommend it. And I'd like to see what you guys think as well. So there you go. That's it for now. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And we'll see you soon. Hey guys, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. And as you guys know, I use Squarespace for my own website. And anytime somebody asks me what they should use for their website or for their portfolio, I always recommend Squarespace. In fact, right now, if you use the code ADAM, you will save 10% on your website when you go to checkout.